Okay, so welcome to the open review session. It is now officially open. So again, this is to help you prepare for exam one. So anything you need to see, any questions that you have, anything that will help you get prepared, please let me know, and we'll just take the questions and things as they come.
You said this is all computational. Can you go over each formula again?
Sure. So to just reiterate your first point, this test will be completely computational. So it's only calculating all of the kind of concepts that we've gone over. So the formulas that you will need to know, and let's just, all right, so the formulas you'll need to know. Oops. You don't need to know how to spell formulas, but anyways. So the formulas you need to know, first off, you will need to know the basic mathematical operators. So make sure that you know addition and subtraction, they're right there. Division, the slash, multiplication is the asterisk. To the power of, the exponents is the hat. So multiply, just remember that is the asterisk, divide, and that is, whoops, that guy, exponent, that's that one up there, that's at shift 6. So those are your basic mathematical functions. And then the other one that we saw right at the beginning was summation. So summation with the sigma symbol, that is equals sum. All right, so that's the formula there. So equals sum, open parentheses, put your scores in there by highlighting them, and then close those parentheses, and that will get you the, that'll get you the summation of those scores. So those were the first ones. That's for the order of operation questions. And then the next set of formulas that we went over were for the mean, the median, and the mode. And for the mean, that is equals average. All right, so it's equals average, not equals mean. If you put in equals mean, and then you highlight your scores and you close out parentheses, you're going to get that error message from Excel. So somebody's going to get it in this exam because it's sitting right there. Calculate the mean. Oh yeah, equals mean. So if you get that hashtag name, that's your message. That means that the formula does not exist. Excel cannot recognize your formula. So you take a look at it and you're like, oh, okay, I put in the wrong formula. And this is very likely to happen because of the next two formulas. So median is just equals median, and mode is just equals mode. So that is, just because of the way our minds work, very susceptible. It makes you very susceptible to just getting into that, oh, median is equals median, mode is equals mode. Of course, mean is equals mean. You might fall for it, but just, you'll get told by Excel. They'll say hashtag name, and that's just your reminder, oh, put in the wrong formula, or misspelled the formula. So as you're typing, if you're doing a little quickly, sometimes you'll misspell a formula, and you'll see that hashtag name. The next set of ones that we were doing was sum of squares, and that one is equals DEVSQ. All right, and this is not equals, equals sum SQ. So this is for the actual sum of squares. This is, you take your scores, you square them, and you sum them all up. That's not at all what we want. We want the deviations to be squared and then summated. So make sure that you're looking for this one. It should say deviations. So it has DEV for deviations in the formula. It has in the description, when you actually pop it up, it will say returns the sum of squares of deviations. So that's the one that you're looking for. You'll notice that for sum of squares returns the sum of squares of the arguments. There's nowhere here that deviations are mentioned. That's not the right one. So do not do this one. Do that DEV SQ. The next one for that is sample standard deviation. We'll do variance first. Sample, I don't know how to get that. Sample variance. Let's just do this. Sample variance. All right, and that's that S squared. I just can't get that 2 up there. And then we have sample standard deviation, which is just S. And you do not have to memorize the symbols either. They will be in the exam itself, so you will see things like, I will spell out, calculate sample variance, S squared, calculate sample standard deviation, S. So you'll have those reminders in the exam. It's more important that you just know how to do them. So sample variance is equals var, and then sample standard deviation is just equals STDEV for standard deviation, and we got that one done as well. So that is basically, I think, all the formulas that we had. And then the last formula that we're going to use, but it's not an Excel formula, it's for your Z-scores. And that one is going to be equal to your, and make sure that you do this, your raw score minus your sample mean, and that has to be in parentheses divided by your sample standard deviation. So that is your formula for a Z-score. And if you don't put those parentheses in, if you write it out without those parentheses, then Excel, which follows order of operations, is going to do this first, because that's division. So if you don't put in the parentheses, Excel will take your mean divided by your standard deviation, and then whatever that is will get subtracted from your raw score. That's not a Z-score. That's not anything. So make sure that you put those parentheses in there. So that's if you want to calculate Z-scores. And then if you want to calculate scores, either recover your original scores or do standardized from these Z-scores. Then the formula for that is your mean plus your standard deviation multiplied by your Z-score. So if you want to if you want to recover those raw scores from your Z-scores, or more typically, you want to create a new set of standardized scores, that's the formula you want to use there. And by far the biggest hiccup that I find students encounter when looking for standardized scores is forgetting what mean they want and what standard deviation they want. So you need to be told, you need to be asked for a specific mean and a specific standard deviation. So they will say, create a new set of standardized scores that has a mean of 100, that has a standard deviation of 15, and then that's the mean and that's the standard deviation that you use in this particular formula. And I think that is all of them. Can you think of any other? Did I miss one?
When did we use the exponent?
That was in order of operations.
Oh.
So we haven't. We've shortcutted the exponent because the sum of squared deviations has that in its formula. Okay. But in the original in the original order of operations, the very first class, we did that. And you will have an order of operation question on the exam. So you will be doing multiplication and division, you will be doing addition, parentheses, subtraction, exponents, summation, so no surprise there. And so do know where those formulas are. And if you forget any of these, all right, and I really want to drive this home because I think it's very unlike what a lot of people experience in other classes. Stats is different. Stats is weird. So you can just go Excel, exponent, all right, and then you can just kind of look it up. Oh, and there's other ways to do it. There's power, there's how to use exponents on Excel. But anyways, if you forget any of these, you know, just feel free to sum of squared, deviations, Excel. Yeah, that's what I mean. So, like I said, if you forget any of them, you know, the Excel DEVSQ function returns the sum of squared deviations. Feel free, Google it. I do not mind at all. That's how I find out information for things that I might not have encountered before or I might not have used for a while. So be aware that you can do that. If you know, if you want to come in with an Excel sheet that looks like this, you know, make it up for yourself and just have that in your notes ready to go, feel free to do that as well. It's not about memorizing, it's about can you get to that final answer. Now on that point, this will probably be a good time to mention as well that these questions will have multiple parts. So for example, in each question, for the sum of squared, for the order of operations, you will be told, here's a set of scores. Find out this formula for those set of scores. Find out this formula for those set of scores, much like we did in the practice sheets for order of operations. So there are parts to a question, it's not all or nothing. However, the final answer has to be correct. So, you know, if you get 80% of the formula correct, but you don't highlight all the scores, if you use sum squared instead of deviation squared, if you make an error and you don't get to that final answer, it's going to be graded incorrectly. So there are multiple parts to most of these questions. They'll ask you for multiple things. So if you can't get one, you'll probably get the others. But just know that again, much like we're simulating a real life situation and the fact that this is open book, we're also simulating a real life situation in the fact that that final answer has to be right. And it's not enough in the professional world, if you're working as a psychologist, to misdiagnose somebody, to calculate the wrong prescription amount, to miss an effective treatment because he calculated the mean wrong. Nobody's going to take consolation in the fact that you were almost there. I almost had it right. You need to get that final answer. So just be aware of that. And one last function that that I want everybody to use is the equals for your answer. Okay, so do not manually enter your answer into your answer cells. Everybody's been pretty good about this so far from what I've seen in the practice sheets. Put that equals function there because again, we're trying to be as exact as we can and we have to carry as many decimals as possible. So if you write it in manually, you're not going to carry decimals. Chances are you're going to make an error at some point just transferring the number through. I know we're all pretty good with attention to detail, but we're not as good as Excel. So let's leave Excel to do the things that Excel is great at, which is being very exact. Use that equals function to put your answer into the answer cell. If you're feeling frisky, I've seen some of you are developing your Excel skills kind of beyond where we are in the class. That's awesome. You can calculate your formula directly in the answer cell if you want to skip that step. But definitely do not manually enter your answer into the answer cell. While we're on the subject of Excel as well, if anything ever happens that's weird during the exam, do not hesitate to call me over. So if you mess up on something that's not statistics related. So I have seen students, you know, if this was question number 1, all right, and this is like, you know, what are all these things? You have to calculate all these things. I have seen students call me over and they're like, I deleted my question, or I've just by mistake it's gone, or I've done something horrible. If you do this, number 1, don't panic. Number 2, if you know how to get it back, get it back. If you don't start going crazy and punching a whole bunch of numbers. Just call me over. If it's not statistics related, I'll say to you, all right, yeah, I can do that. I can fix that for you. So if it's something like not enough decimals are showing up, oops, right? If you're saying to yourself, oh my gosh, I can't, you know, I know there's supposed to be more decimals, I don't see the decimals, I'll come by and I'll just say, oh, there you go, there's your decimals right there. If you end up with that, that's not doing it, I'm gonna force it. If you end up with that hashtag thing and it's making you nervous, call me over and I'll, you know, expand the column for you. If it's an Excel thing, just call me over. If it's a stats thing, but you're not sure, call me over, and when I see it, I'll just tell you that's a stats thing, right? So if it's something like this, where you say something like, oh, I don't understand what's going on with this error message, that's a statistics thing, right? We've gone over this. That's Excel telling you you put in the wrong formula. So if you call me over and say, oh, I put in the formula, I got hashtag name, I don't know what that means, I will just, you know, no judgments, I will just say, I can't help you, that's part of the exam, that's a statistics, you know, that's a statistics thing. If on the other hand, it's, you know, the hashtag thing, I'll just fix it immediately. So call me over. There's usually not a lot of issues on the Excel exams, but if there is, don't waste time, you know, trying to figure it out for yourself if you don't need to. Call me over and I'm more than happy to, you know, take care of it if it's an Excel issue. All right, so just another kind of tip for coming here today. For the Z-scores and the calculation of Z-scores, I'm not entirely sure why, I don't know why this is, but most students will get the Z-scores, right? So this column here, I find that most students will, when I'm grading this, they will get the Z-scores. So, you know, I won't say too much about that. If you're going to make an error on the calculation of the, if you're going to make an error on the Z-score calculations, typically it's for those standardized scores. And I'm not sure why. It's just one more formula. It's kind of like a standardized thing. But what I will say is, because of this, I highly recommend check the mean and check the standard deviation, because you know what it should be. A new standardized score with a mean of 40 and a standard deviation of 10, and you've already actually, if you're doing it with the method I illustrated in class, you've already calculated the mean and the standard deviation for your X scores, so you can just copy that wholesale and copy it over here to your standardized scores. And when I do that, right off the bat, I know that I've done this wrong. I can tell immediately that I have calculated these standardized scores incorrectly, because whereas I do have my standard deviation of 10 that I was hoping for, I got a mean of 4. I messed up somewhere. So that is going to save you basically 50% on that question, because in a question like this, and it'll be, one of the questions will be very much set up like this, you get half of the points for the Z-scores, half the points for the standardized scores, and it doesn't take, you know, more than half a second, well, it takes more than half a second, it doesn't take more than 5 seconds to copy and paste those formulas, to just double check, make sure that you have those done correctly. And I've seen, again, most of the errors tend to be with the standardized scores, and they don't, it's not just one little number that is off, it's usually the entire standardized scores are off somewhere. Very easy to notice that and to determine that just by calculating their mean and their standard deviation.
How did you do that?
Which part?
Like with the Excel part, like to
Oh, okay. So when you're, if you do it the way that I set it up before,
Yes.
you will calculate the mean of your raw scores. You'll calculate the standard deviation of your raw scores. So you have these formulas ready to go, which basically says, I want you to calculate the average of skip this cell and then grab these 10 cells over here. So because we have the same setup over here, we can actually copy this, paste that formula over here, and then, and this is another thing to kind of use in the exam. Just double click it and make sure that it's doing what you want it to do. Because if you double click it here, you see that it's calculating the average, it's choosing the correct set of scores, and same thing for the standard deviation. Now you said yours is not?
Oh, there it goes.
It's working now?
I can do it, but now I can't.
Yeah. Well, that's why we're here. Better now than the exam, right?
Right?
So it's this one right here, right?
Yes.
Okay, cool. All right, so this, let's go through it. This is overkill. You won't see anything as massive as that, but it will illustrate all the kind of stuff that we're going to be doing. So whenever you encounter this, you got to go through the order of operations. First thing we're going to do is anything that is in parentheses. So let's set that up. So when we read the equation, we got the sum of x cubed minus the sum of y cubed multiplied by z's minus 1, all divided by x squared minus 2. Z's minus 1 and x squared minus 2, those are in parentheses. So we are going to, I'll just copy this. We are going to put those into two columns here so we can do those calculations. All right, so z minus 1, the z-score is minus 1. We do that first, so that's that z-score minus 1. And then, once again, just equals, highlight the z-score, minus 1. We want to do that for all the z-scores, so we can copy and paste that all the way down. And then for the x-scores, we're going to have to square them and then subtract 2. So we can do that in the one column. We could break it up, but just to kind of show you this, we can do it in the one column. So we highlight the x-score, shift 6 for the exponent, raise it to the exponent 2, and then from that subtract 2. And that will square the x-score and then subtract 2. So Excel will follow order of operations as well. So once again, it's the score, shift 6 to the exponent 2, minus 2, and then we can fill that all the way down. So once we're done that, we are done with the parentheses part of this. The next thing that we do in our order of operations are any additional exponents. And as we can see, we have 2 more additional exponents here. We have x cubed and we have y squared. So we got to take care of those. So for the x scores cubed, so that equals, and then make sure that you're going back to the original. So it's asking for the original x cubed. So we go back to the original, shift 3, and we can populate that. Shift 6 for the hat for the exponent, shift 3 for to the exponent 3. So we got x squared, x to the exponent 3. Now we got to do our y squares. So once again, equals, highlight your y score. That's the one that we want. Shift 6 for the exponent to the exponent 2. And we can pop that all the way down. And then we're done with our exponents. Next thing that we do is we do our multiplication left to right. And the multiplication left to right, the only multiplication and division left to right, the ones that we have is this little section here. We have y squared times z minus 1, all of that divided by x squared minus 2. So let's break this up. So remember that we do multiplication left to right. Okay, so make sure that you're doing this left to right as well. but let's do it step by step. So the first thing we have is we have the y squared multiplied by the z-scores minus 1. There's your y squared, there's your z-score minus 1. So we go equals y squared, shift 8, that's the asterisk to multiply them together. There's your z minus 1. So in this stage, if students make a mistake, it's because they go back to the original y. They don't actually multiply what's being asked for. It wants y squared to be multiplied by z minus 1. We found the y squares, we found the z minus 1s. We got to multiply those together. You can fill that all the way down. And then the next step is this answer, this y squared times z minus 1 divided by x squared minus 2. So we can say, all right, we've just calculated that. So we're going to take that and we're going to divide it by our x squared minus 2, which is right there. So again, highlight the correct portions, highlight the correct previous calculations, and then we are almost done. So we have done all our multiplication from left to right. The last thing we do is we do any summation. So we need to sum the x cubes, and then we need to sum whatever we ended up with in that summation. So it's the sum of all of this. So we got to make sure that we sum all of this. So let's do that first, because actually we don't even have to do that here, sorry. Let's do that down here where we have our sum of stuff. All right, so we want the sum of the x cubes. We want the sum of this whole big large formula. So here is where we go equals sum, open parentheses, highlight all the x scores cubed, and we get that answer there. And then here we go equals sum, highlight all of the y squares multiplied by z minus 1 divided by x squared minus 2. We're going to sum up that whole thing. And then the last move is we need to take those x cubes minus this whole thing. And that is our answer. We pop it up into our answer cell right here. We scroll on down. Yay, we got that one correct. So that is the entire kind of run of that. And if you can do this one, you are very prepared for the order of operations part of the exam. And do make sure that you go through the steps. Easily, the biggest mistake that is made is in the summation and addition and subtraction. I don't know what it is, but there is a huge temptation to do addition and subtraction before summation. Summation goes before addition and subtraction. So it's that VIP status, it's that special symbol, it gets to go first. So by far, the kind of question that is the most difficult, or not, it's not even the most difficult, but by far the one that is most often done incorrectly are ones that look like this. And for some reason, when you put sum of x squared minus 1, or sum of anything minus anything, or plus anything, for some reason students will do the minus 1 first. If they get it wrong, they'll do the minus 1 first. And it's the highest proportion of errors. So in this case, they'll take a look at this, and instead of summing x first and then taking 1 away from it, they'll do x minus 1 first. So they'll go over here and they'll be like, oh, okay, there's the x scores minus 1, and they'll do that first, and then sum that up. That's going to get you the wrong answer, right? That is not the sum of x minus 1. The sum of x minus 1 is the sum of x, which is 280, minus 1, oops, 279. So 268, wrong, 279 is correct, but for whatever reason, that's the one that if you're gonna make a mistake, chances are that's gonna be the mistake that you make. So the best thing, best advice I can give for this is every single time, just go through the steps. And when you're looking at a question, just ask yourself, are there parentheses? No. Are there exponents? No. Are there multiplication and division? No. Is there a summation sign? Yes. All right, do that first. Then, is there addition and subtraction? So have that list written out for you, because one of these days, I'm going to figure it out, and I'm going to get that move done 100% correctly on the exam. And I might retire after that. I'm not sure. That's going to be probably like a crowning achievement of my statistics teaching career. But it, like we've seen, the reason, another reason I bring this up a lot is we've seen -1. It pops up everywhere in statistics. So we've seen it as when you correct sample variance and sample standard deviation to get to a correct estimator. We got that -1. When we take a look at degrees of freedom, it's all going to be -1. So I don't know why in our universe -1 just pops up all the time, but it does. So better learn how to deal with -1. But that's, did you get to the?
Yes.
Yep. So there you go.
Awesome. So I go summation, addition, and subtraction.
Yes. So summation first, addition and subtraction after it, and left to right. So multiplication and division from left to right, addition and subtraction from left to right. And that's again just a convention. It could have went from right to left, but a whole bunch of mathematicians and statisticians got together and they said, let's choose a direction, and they said, we read left to right, so let's do it left to right. And that's what it is. And it's just a way to make sure that everybody gets to the same answer every single time.
Right.
So I don't know if you've ever seen, every once in a while on social media, something will come up where people are like, nobody can solve this equation. People think it's 42, it's actually 7. And people will get into arguments and little flame wars in the comments, and they'll be like, it's 42 because you're supposed to do this. And other people will be like, no, it's 7 because this is the correct order. They've been taught 2 different ways. They're coming from 2 different conventions. So they're both right, in a sense. It just, this is the agreed upon way that statisticians and most mathematicians have done it. Occasionally, I don't know, they have a meeting somewhere, probably Helsinki or something, and get together and say, you guys want to change stuff? And if you're between those generations, you'll get into those flame wars where you'll say things like, oh, I can't believe millennials are so bad at math. And millennials will be like, I don't know what these baby boomers are doing. This is completely incorrect. Probably why. All right, we got another, looks like 5 minutes. So I think this was a pretty good review session. I'm glad we got to go through the stuff that we have. If you have any final questions or anything, this would be your kind of last call. Yeah, use that equals function as much as possible, because you really don't want to open yourself up to errors, and you really don't want to get rid of the exactness of your calculations before you have to, right? So it's an accumulation of error if you start doing that, and it can take you way off course. All right, so that was a pretty good review session. So that is it for today, and we will see you for the exam tomorrow.